Boss fights. Some of the most memorable moments in any video game, be it because they're fun mechanically, interesting thematically, or just because they're very, very cool. These battles often take on some kind of monstrous form for the player to triumph over, something gargantuan. Think of your Bowsers and your Ganons. But there's a special type of encounter that I want to talk about today. A type of encounter that's all too familiar. A reflection in the water. I'm talking about these guys. Hello, chums. This is a video idea that I've wanted to make for a good long while. I've always been very fascinated by the idea of having player-like boss encounters since I first started playing video games. I mean that genuinely. By the way, one of the first games I ever played was Sonic Rush, and one of the most memorable parts of that game is the fucking have a nice fall, you stupid bitch. But before I get ahead of myself, what exactly do I mean by a, quote, player boss? Well, the way I define it is a boss character who either reflects the player physically, such as your classic doppelganger characters, or in the actual mechanics of the fight. They also obviously tend to have narrative similarities as well, but you know, that's not really like exclusive. If it feels like you're fighting yourself in the literal sense, then it probably makes sense for what I'm talking about. Because of these reasons, these boss encounters are often very special to me, because they stand out greatly compared to other encounters in their games. To list what I consider to be an example, think of Calamity Ganon from Breath of the Wild, and how it is a very different fight to Ganondorf in Tears of the Kingdom. Calamity Ganon is a pretty generic final boss monster compared to his appearance in Tears of the Kingdom, where he takes on his human form, which is already a good start. He uses the same weapon types as you during his fight and switches between them, and he can also even slow time when dodging your attacks, just like how you've been doing across the two games. Elements like this that directly reflect the player is what I consider to be a player boss. Something that doesn't entirely feel like you're fighting a monster, but more so thinking of it in the same vein as a fight in a multiplayer game. This video will focus on 3 of these encounters that I picked out that I thought were pretty cool, given a little bit of context for each in their respective games, and why I think they're all really great examples of this concept. So without wasting any more precious digital seconds, let's explore our first encounter. ULTRAKILL is very much a game that speaks for itself. To quickly summarize, ULTRAKILL is a video game where you play as V1, a blood-fueled robot who needs to descend into hell because all of the blood on Earth, i.e. humanity, is gone. Having been in early access since 2020, the game has received a lot of content in that time. However, what I want to focus on is one of the earlier boss encounters in the game. In fact, this boss appears as early as the final level of Limbo, an artificial labyrinth, and the very first layer of hell. Up until this point, you fought our good friend Maurice, the Thinker, and the Great Giggle Shit, all being demons which follow a similar stone design. Our example does not. This is the final stage of Limbo, in a level that you could not possibly guess the name of. You approach a building, and you're not able to proceed through the forward door, or so you think. Once you've collected the first skull needed to unlock the door, you place it on its pedestal. And since you only have 2 more to find, you naturally turn back and...
Did you guys fucking see that?
That was some kind of red guy. But I'm sure we won't be seeing that guy again, right? Uh-oh. Because why would I not start with V2? This character fits every part of the description, and it's also from one of my favorite games of all time, so it was only natural that I'd start the list here. V2 is a supreme machine, just like you, but instead of being made with blood absorption in mind, it has a higher durability. Both V1 and V2 were never mass-produced due to the redundancy during the new piece, so there's presumably only one of each model in existence. It is unknown as to how or when V2 arrived in Hell, but what is known is that it is not friendly and it also has built-in taunts, I guess. This fight is the biggest skill check the player will have encountered so far. V2 utilizes most of the weapons you currently have access to, being the standard revolver and shotgun. This guy is by far the trickiest enemy to hit at this point in the game, as it can also use your own mobility and can directly respond to the player's position. If you approach V2, it'll back away, and if you run away, it'll approach you. This fight pretty much embodies the I'm you but better idea in everything that it does. It moves like you, it fights like you, it can do everything that you can do. If you're the first V model, doesn't that make this one the superior? Eventually, with enough gaming finesse, and also assuming this is still your first encounter with the thing, it is eventually defeated, running away from the encounter and leaving behind the Knuckle Blaster, its arm. Naturally, you immediately steal it and continue your trip through hell. This, however, would not be the end of V2. As you carry on through hell, elsewhere V2 swears revenge, and by crafting a new arm out of scavenged parts it found, it eventually catches up to you in the final level of Greed. You already know exactly what you're getting into before you even step foot inside of the arena. And I don't even have to say much about what you're seeing right now. Genuinely, what the fuck? V2 not only appears again with a brand new arm, but it learns from your previous encounter by adapting its weaponry. It can now use a nail gun for rapid fire attack, and can switch to the marksman revolver to toss coins and shoot them back down at you, and yes, you heard me right, a second marksman revolver has hit the greed layer. This rematch actually has a brand new interaction that can happen because of this, where you can shoot V2's coins out of the air before they do, and the exact same thing can happen to you. This fight really makes V2 feel like you're fighting your friend in a multiplayer versus mod or something. It really solidifies what I love about boss fights like these. The fact that it learned from its previous encounter and is visibly more annoyed by your presence makes V2 an incredible character. I also, it's kind of off topic, but when I was doing research for this video, I found out that punching V2 with the Knuckle Blaster, you know, the arm that you stole from it, grants the stop hitting yourself bonus on the style meter. This game is incredible. It again tries to run away when you beat it, but V1 chooses to chase it this time. In its pursuit of revenge, in its pursuit to be the best V model to grace hell, V2 becomes nothing more than a...
Talk about a low-budget flight.
There's a whole lot to appreciate about V2. They kind of just show up, aura farm, fuck off, show up again, aura farm harder, and then die. It's kind of just like a baseline, cool boss. It's unique, it's fun to fight, and it's narratively super funny because, like, what did they do to you? Why are you such an asshole? The fight matches the player with a perfect copy of themselves and forces them to adapt or die. It's actually quite a useful tool for teaching the player the movement of the game, and also teaches them to switch between weapons pretty often. But yeah, V2 is cool, it's a really cool doppelganger fight. Can't wait for V3 and Fraud. Our next entry is somebody that I've talked about already, so I'll try to make this one quick. Silex appears as the primary antagonist of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, but his story isn't quite that simple. You see, Metroid really loves practicing delayed gratification with things like Project Dread nearing completion, and for Silex to actually fucking do something. His first appearance was in 2006 in Metroid Prime Hunters for the DS. The game focuses on other bounty hunter characters as well as multiplayer. By design, Silex is already a boss encounter that's supposed to feel like a player, but I want to focus more on the Prime 4 version, so I'll just kind of skip over this one. His main characteristic was that he hated Samus and the Galactic Federation, but other than that, he was essentially just another one of the 6 bounty hunters that appeared in that game. Very unfortunately for us, not much changed. His character design and unexplained hatred for our main character were likely enough to grant him a more substantial role, making some more notable appearances in the endings of Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, where he's seen stalking Samus' gunship from afar, and in Metroid Prime Federation Force, where he steals a Metroid. From the release of Hunters, it would take Silex almost 20 years to finally appear as a primary antagonist. But with Prime 4's release, he was finally in a game for at least more than 10 minutes. He attacks a research center at the beginning of the game and has a standoff with Samus. They get teleported to another planet, and then he sits in a pod until he hears the sweet, sultry voice of Miles McKenzie, which is when he realizes the true meaning of the journey, and that it was to clip farm the whole time. Although he starts off the battle a little bit wacky, his final phase has him revert back to just himself. Silex is a particularly interesting case for me, because in the Metroid series, A majority of bosses in those games are big fuckers or big mechanical fuckers. Fighting another human, especially as the final boss of the game, is something that I think is pretty noteworthy. The boss fight also opens with his first spoken lines ever, and I just think that's pretty cool. The boss isn't particularly challenging at all, but a boss fight that has good vibes can do just as good for my little gamer brain as one that's difficult. Salak's moveset mimics Samus, with his version of the arm cannon being the shot coil, which lets him unleash a bunch of different attacks. And he also deploys Lockjaw, which is his evil and fucked up version of the Morph Ball. And I'm always a sucker for moments in boss fights which affect the status of a player on a fundamental level. Again, to reference Ganondorf's Tears of the Kingdom fight. That battle has it so you can permanently lose one of your hearts, reducing your max HP. This fight similarly has an interaction where when Samus is struck by the Lockjaw, Silex can steal an energy tank and he scuttles away like a little dweeb hoping to take it away for good. I think even simply giving him a Morph Ball like attack helps him feel a lot more like Samus. Narratively, he's pretty much her if she was a spiteful prick. Silex is relentless, and his only goal is to kill you. Even during the phase with the Federation members, his main focus is still you, and Samus is the only name that he states before he attacks. His moveset can reflect his sheer rage towards Samus, with him dashing around the stage and rushing at you constantly, utilizing electricity and even mini black holes later in the phase to try to take you down by any means necessary. The energy tank steal that I mentioned before is especially petty. That move in particular makes it feel like he's player controlled and is only there to troll you. Although his appearance in the game is unfortunately quite brief and flawed, his boss fight is great, and I love Silex, man. It was so refreshing to have a different type of boss fight, and I really like what they did with the encounter. And I did say I was going to be quick, so now I'm going to transition to the final one. If you're at all familiar with my channel, this one isn't very surprising either. Splatoon is a very special series with some very interesting lore. The world of this game is built so carefully, built with so much detail, that you can really get sucked in once you're invested. Despite this, the story mode in each game often struggles to incorporate the same amount of tactility, often being just okay or disappointing. But then, the Splatoon 2 development team, after 2 whole games, dared to ask one question. What if we made it good? Octo expansion is the second story campaign in Splatoon 2, and the first to have a playable Octoling. Splatoon's story modes offer a bunch of linear get to the end of the stage type levels and a few boss fights. This isn't so bad in the first game because it's entirely acceptable and kind of a smaller side mode if you look at it that way, but Splatoon 2 did the exact same formula, which means they made the exact same mistakes, and it's even more boring. Having a series that specializes in having a world that feels like it moves with our own, making the story mode the worst part of the package is honestly really surprising. You kind of just get recycled plot points that got to the point where the third game story mode made fun of it and then proceeded to do it again. And Mario Galaxy stage designs, which isn't bad, but after a while it gets, a little forgettable. Octo expansion was the first campaign to really bring the story to the forefront with an actually interesting setting and gameplay that makes sense in the context of the story. The levels are memorable and unique, and the characters are fun and interesting. The only complaint that I can think of is the fact that the bosses in the game are just remixed versions of the normal story mode bosses. However, our final frontier, once again, is a very unique case. Octo expansion begins with Agent 8, the playable character, Captain Cuddlefish, and Agent 3, the playable character from the first game, being dragged into some mysterious underground subway. Agent 8 and Cuddlefish are around, but Agent 3 is nowhere to be seen. Cut to the end of the game and oh, there they are. But as soon as they arrive, they tap out immediately. But because Tartar recognizes Peak, they capture Agent 3 while they're still unconscious along with Cuddlefish, and race to meet you as you're about to escape the facility. And the fight that follows is pretty much the reason this video exists in the first place. It's the perfect formula. A game where you fight the playable character from the previous game is always, without a doubt, going to be cool. Much like the other games I've talked about here, Splatoon at this point had an abundance of big machines, with the literal only exception being this guy as their bosses. So being greeted by Agent 3 barreling towards you is probably one of the best moments in the entire series. Splatoon has explored single player stages that are supposed to mimic online battles with the Octolings, but this is completely different. Agent 3, by all definitions, is a dirty little cheater. They have your weapons, but can also drop roll and use a multitude of specials which they can also spam repeatedly. And to really hone in on this being a fight with your past self, the song that plays is a remix of the main theme of Splatoon 1, which is honestly half the reason the fight is as cool as it is. Something I think would have been really cool is if they use special weapons from Splatoon 1, like Kraken or Killer Whale or something. This fight is just a textbook cool encounter, and it also brings the PvP aspect of Splatoon into the story content in a very fun way. That being said, Agent 3, in all honesty, is not very hard. At least not in this encounter. You see, after you reach 100% completion and beat the game, you are now able to access the final challenge, the infamous Inner Agent 3 fight. If Agent 3 was cheating before, then they're on some pretendo shit with the amount of random bullshit go fuckery they're able to achieve during this battle. This fight is notorious for being what is still probably considered to be the most difficult challenge in the series for a lot of players. Agent 3 is far more aggressive, has access to new special weapons, and takes a lot longer to take down. Two of these specials, being the Bubble Blower and the dreaded Auto Bomb Launcher, can place down threats on the map that can linger and chain with other attacks that they use. The auto bombs are especially brutal considering how many they're able to throw out and how difficult they can be to escape when you have no armor. This fight definitely fixes the difficulty problem, albeit through, as I said, random bullshit. You have Agent 3 trying to shoot you, the auto bombs chasing you down, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that can be on the map. They're also running some fucking Inksaver Pures or something because they paint way more than you can. Both of Agent 3's fights are some of my favorite memories with Splatoon. Narratively, they're perfect, having Agent 8 triumph over 3 in both contexts to convey their growth from the beginning of the game, and it's just really awesome. It places the focus on this brand new character who more widely represents Octolings coming to the surface for the first time, and it's just really cool. I'd love to see more encounters like Agent 3's in future titles. I was pretty disappointed with the Shiver and Fry encounters for not featuring any moments where you're actually directly fighting either of them. I would love for Splatoon 4 to have an encounter like this, even if it's not with an already established character, because I just think it's kind of cool and a cool change of pace with the other kind of fights that you have in the series. Agent 3, your aura is unmatched. Splatoon 3 wasted you. Thank you for your service. And that is the end of the video. Thank you for watching. This is something that I've kind of wanted to talk about for a while, like I said, because I think it's a cool... I don't know if it's exactly a trope or anything, but I think it's a cool thing that video games do to have characters or boss fights feel a lot more personal, especially compared to more generic kind of boss fights. I think aiming for a more personal experience between the player and the player character and then the character that you're fighting, and just narratively how that works, I think it makes it just makes a fight way more memorable to me. And you know, there's a bunch of different examples that I didn't even bring up. There's some that I used as an example, like Ganondorf, who I mentioned twice for some reason. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk about video game stuff that I like. So I did, and you watched it presumably, so thank you. But yeah, no more bosses today. I'm done. That's all I've got.
Oh, but what about me?